Hello and welcome back to Pandemic Playground with Dave. Alright, so before we begin our crash testing with small grid rovers, I feel like there's a lot of experimenting to be done. So today we are going to check out what type of walls or small grids that we could crash right into that would produce the best wreckage. Alright, so why would I want to build a wall that produces the best wreckage? Well, we want to test the safety of the vehicles. So if you bounce off a wall, then what's the point of that? But if you want the most ultimate destruction of either the rover or even the wall itself. So I did do a quick test to see how some of these work. Unfortunately, it is, I don't know why, but it is just random in some ways. But we gotta keep testing it to see what produces the best wall to have a rover hit it and potentially hurt the driver, which one blows up the rover in whatever case. So we're having a little bit of a different setup today, and that's with my second account, or our second account, to kind of go through it as the driver. So here we have our driver here. Say hi. And again, it's a bit of a different setup. Actually have two keyboards right in front of me, so I'm gonna have to figure what is the best way to do this without causing too much issues. Drivers in the small grid rover that I have here, so I'm gonna test it with just this rover that I built, part of my experiment using bikes or motorcycles. So this one, it is a very slim kind of build based on the wheels here, because it is kind of extending out on the sides here. So this one, it can go fairly quick. It's a quick design, all done with light armor blocks, so no heavy armor blocks here, which might cause a bit of a difference. But we're gonna just test it using this vehicle because it is pretty much the seats right in the middle, and you have some kind of bouncing in the front. So that's the vehicle I'm gonna use for the testing here. And of course, the walls that we need to kind of go through is multiple and different types of materials. So one we have is a light armor block, right? So we want to make sure we can go through a light armor block. Will it bounce? Will it cause a good destruction? Will it hurt the driver? Whatever the case is, I don't know. Here's the blast doors. We tried before in a large grid setting, but I converted all to small grid setting to see what happens. Will you bounce again? Will you actually go through it? And then we have these little grate systems here, which is the barred windows. So I use this barred windows, put one layer. You could do multiple layers, but I'll just do one layer for now to see how it works. And then of course the more ideal or my popular choice would be window panes. As going through window panes, I think look pretty awesome, and it kind of makes the shape of the rover when you fly through it. And we have the LCD screens, which I didn't realize I built it kind of sideways here. So that we're gonna give that a bit of a try. It's not tiny small 1x1 grids, but they're like a little bit larger in some sense. But let's see how it goes. And lastly, here we have the small conveyor junctions. So the small conveyor junctions are lined up here to see how well it's gonna work. Of course, there are many different materials that we can use. These are a few selected ones that I wanted to try out. I mean, we could also use neon tubes at some point. We can use catwalk grids based on being large grid. Actually, is there small grid versions of neon tubes? Nope. So if we want to test large grid, then we'll move over to those things. But currently, we're just gonna test small grid items. So we're gonna put it to the test and see how well this is gonna crash through. And then after that, we're gonna go and find our way through these things here. So this here is a bit of a wall that I created with the voxel hands. Well, as you see, the first one I made was a little bit on the diagonal side. I think both of them actually is diagonal in some ways. I was hoping to make it kind of straight as possible, but no big deal. So I don't know if there is a difference between the voxels. This here is stone, we have sand, and then ice. I think there might be a little bit of a difference between them. Unfortunately, I made the stone one a little bit too small, but we should be fine and okay to crash through it. I'm thinking and hoping that there's not a lot of a difference, so we don't have to go crazy with this. But if there is a bit of a difference, I'm gonna have to kind of test them all out, or at least all the groupings. So as you see here in the voxel hands, on the bottom right underneath the P gravity, and also that little compass map thingy, or I don't even know what that's called, to be honest. You see right now stone, and you can also cycle them to different stones. You can even cycle it to iron, nickel, magnesium, silicone, and so forth, right? So does any of these really matter? I don't know. If you guys know, leave a comment down below. I would really be interested in wanting to find out if any of those voxels does make a difference in terms of crashing into them. But yeah, so we're going to test all these out today. And then there's a lot of other things I want to try before we get started with building our main crash testing site, where we're going to crash our current rovers, some economy based rovers that you can buy, and of course stuff that you guys make and have in the workshop. So based on the current interest, I think I am going to work with that series, and I hope you guys stay tuned and look out for it relatively soon. But of course, we just want to test things as we go. Right, so we have the driver ready, and I'm gonna put myself kind of in a nice decent spot to kind of see the damage here. Alright, so I'm gonna put ourselves here, and we're gonna have our driver try to reach 100 meters per second into these walls. Okay. And by the way, yeah, the way I did this is basically converted to small grid using a hinge system with the small hinge part, and just put it across and connected the two, so it has more stability there. So that's just the basic way of doing it, to be honest. Nothing too crazy. Alright, so I'm going to park myself here, and our driver is ready. So again, we're going to try our best to make it to 100 meters per second. I think the max speed that I kind of got from this in the earlier testing was about 85 to 90, so that shouldn't be too bad. But here we go. So we're going to bring our driver in as quickly as possible, and I think we're going to be able to hit 80. Yep, we're a little over 80, and we're going to hit right into the wall now. Alright, that caused a nice hole. Nothing too crazy. I didn't take any damage from the driver, at least, so that's a good thing. Still 100% health, which is awesome. So the interesting part here will be the type of hole it created. It did destroy the cockpit, so that kind of rendered that useless. So that's an interesting crash and a good test to see how well a light armor block a wall does. So it looks like it destroys a lot in the front and creates a small bit of a hole. So now we move on to the blast doors. The blast doors, as we tested previously with large grid, we kind of just bounced off, which is interesting. And it may be because the wheels are in the front, so it just bounces off that way. But we also did try initially with the small grid version of it as a test to the tester in a way, and it didn't do anything, and it just bounced off once again, which is a bit odd. So now we're gonna try our best to crash into it and see if it will just bounce off, or will it just do something different again. Alright, so we're about the wall, about 90 meters per second, and it looks like we just splat right into the wall. Alright, so it looks like we are safe once again. Driver's still around, and the hole is, at least it didn't bounce, but it did take apart a lot of the rover, as you see here. Well, it looks like the more destruction actually occurred on the wall, the light armor blocks, versus the blast doors. So that's quite interesting, and it's actually hanging by a thread here. But if you look at the test to the tester, as I mentioned before, this happened. Absolutely nothing. But looks like it just kind of varies in some ways, so hopefully we get something that doesn't vary too much by putting it to the test at least twice or maybe multiple times. I might do this again to get a better take on it. So let's just move on to the next thing, and the next thing is these barred windows. Alright, so we are ready. Driver's in seat, I'm gonna head over and try our best to aim for the barred windows. It's a bit small of a target because I didn't make it too wide, just for testing purposes. And we are about 90 meters per second and right into the barred windows. Alright, that's not too bad. Health is at 100%. Nothing crazy happened to this except for the wheels in the front is completely destroyed. Driver's safe. We didn't even go through it, which is pretty interesting. We were close to, I think, 89 to 90 meters per second. And it just broke the wheels or the suspensions off of the front. So that's an interesting crash. A little bit different from the first initial test to the tester, where it did pretty much break a lot of the thing. Actually, no, it's very similar. It broke the wheels in front, and it made this kind of hole here. But this one was 3 layered versus 1. So, okay, I think barred windows would probably be out of the picture if it doesn't go through to make a good crash, and if it doesn't do too much damage. But we'll just keep going and see what's up with the rest of the blocks here or the walls here. Alright, so the driver's in. We're gonna find our way to crash right into the window panes, and hopefully I don't miss. So we are at 90 meters per second, and boom. Alright, so I kind of missed there, which is terrible. But the driver is also safe once again. Nothing crazy happened. And it looks like I hit half and half, so that was not ideal. So I did want to kind of crash right into the window panes directly. So I might have to retest that in a second somehow. Yeah, we'll come back to that in a second. But the window panes in the first initial test, again, it had 3 layers just to play around with, and it kind of produced a bit of a hole here. It wasn't too crazy, but it's a similar aspect. I think this is very similar to the barred windows, to be honest, except it probably breaks a little bigger. I mean, this is not like the best test either because it's not an equal shape around all of them, but it's just to get a decent idea of like what's the best crash site or crashing wall that we can use. I mean, ultimately we can use all of them if we wanted to, but if it doesn't produce anything fantastic or a nice big explosion or whatever the case is, I'd rather not use it, to be honest. Alright, driver's in. I'm going to crash into these LCD panels or LCD screens, and we're just going to see how fast are we going. We are up to 90 meters per second almost, and we're going to hit the wall. Boom. And we actually killed the driver. Dead body here, laying right down, a little bit tired, maybe going for a sleep more than being dead. But LCD screens or panels did a number on the driver and also the vehicle. So I guess this is what's left of the vehicle, so that is pretty cool. It created a very volatile situation, I guess. Wow. So that kind of took out the vehicle, the wall, and it spread it even into my conveyor junctions here, which is not the best thing in the world, but it's alright. We'll fix that by doing this. So I was not expecting it to really kill the driver, but apparently it did. And it may be because the cockpit was destroyed first and you flew into the wall. I don't know. But we have one more to go, and that is this conveyor wall here. And let me get my driver into the last and final small grid rover, so we can crash right into this one here. Alright, so we're situated and driver's ready and going. Okay, so I'm hoping this final one looks great, because on the test it looked kind of great. So we are at about 90 meters per second, and we're hitting the wall now. And it looks like the driver is once again been dispatched. This one created a big old hole onto here, and I wonder what it's going to look like with different layers. But one layer, it created and caused this big shape of the rover. I guess this is what's left of the rover, and that's the dispatched engineer there. So interesting. We have two things that we can definitely use and use that as a tester for the crash site, because it can kill the driver a bit. So I definitely want to use those things then. I want to use the smoke conveyor junctions, LCD screens. These we can still use because it does produce a nice bit of a crash in a hole. But with these, I think you would be okay for the most part if your cockpit was a little bit in the middle or in the back, and you have a lot of things in the front. These guys are a different story. I guess they kind of blow up. It's like kind of running into a whole bunch of warheads, which I'm not going to test that. We all know what's going to happen. You run into warheads. But the windows we can try again. Just as a quick example. We are in. All right. So in 3, 2, 1, go. So we should reach probably about the same, 89 to 90 meters per second, and we should be able to run right into this wall without any issues. Yep, we're 89, close to 90, and boom. Oh. That actually did pretty well. My guy's actually underneath the rover, but not a bit of a scratch. So I do want to say LCD panel, definitely. Smoke conveyor junctions, a pretty good idea. This one, the window pane, it looks like we couldn't even go through it all the way. I was hoping it can, but it does stop it a bit. So the next thing to do, of course, is to test it on these walls. Alright, so the most important thing is this stone. Very tiny. I should have made it a little bit bigger, and I probably still can make it bigger, but we're just gonna leave it as that for now. And hopefully we just don't miss. We just gotta kind of glide very, very closely to the right side of this platform. Right, so driver's going in. We're gonna position, let's just position ourselves a little bit closer to the wall. Not to the wall, the side of the track, so we can hit the wall pretty well. Okay, in 3, 2, 1, we're gonna head off, and we should make it to the wall at 89 to 90 meters per second. And let's see what the damage is like. Yep, we hit 89, and kaboom. No way, that's it? Not a scratch, and a bit of a dent, I guess you can say. Nothing too crazy, which is interesting. It just made a bit of a dent. The front wheels broke off, so I guess we gotta test it on the sand now. If it produces the same result, then yeah, none of the different voxels really matter in terms of crashing into it. And this wall is kind of thick. Maybe we could do a thinner wall if you want to test it, but with a thick wall like that, it really didn't do too much. It's a bit of a dent, a bit of a hole, but it didn't destroy the whole entire rover, and I mean it wasn't actually looking that great either. So here's the next part. The driver's here, and we're gonna crash into the sand wall, and it just bounced back. Okay. So that bounced back all the way over here, and I lost one of the wheels at least. And the hole does look a little bit different. So it's more spread out left and right than it is vertical. This one hit a little bit. No, actually no, this one's condensed. So maybe there is a big difference between voxel materials. I think there actually is. Well, sand in terms of, you know, material should not be that hard. But it's actually interesting that the sand kind of bounced off more than it did for the stone. But again, I think most of these tests, for some reason, maybe server side kind of situation, it does kind of vary if you test it multiple times. But I hope that's not the case here. But anyways, next one, we're ready. and I'm gonna hit into ice. And the ice is fairly dense for the most part, but let's see what it does in terms of crashing right into it. And boom. Okay, so there is a big difference. Yeah, so it looks like there will be differences in terms of voxels, so that's interesting. So now I really gotta look into which voxel has the better crash. The ice one did create a big hole and a little tunnel system, which is pretty cool, but it did bounce back the rover itself. Alright, so it looks like I gotta do a little bit further testing with different voxels, but I think ideally in terms of materials, unless you guys have another suggestion in materials, I am going to likely use conveyor junctions. I'm gonna test out to see if doing layers make a difference. LCD panels, layers, if it makes a difference. I may scratch these guys or maybe just group them all into one big test, but I think our crash safety is gonna use these guys to make it more challenging. So depending on what kind of vehicle you make, how will you survive as a driver, and how well your rover will survive crashing right into it. So that's a bit of a test for today. Hope you guys did enjoy this video, this test, and I hope to get to the actual test site very soon. And as always, if you made it this far in the video, hit that thumbs up, like the video. If you haven't done so, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, help with the analytics, and drop a comment down below. And of course, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.